What happens when a racist heckler attacks a performer mid-show in front of 3,000 people? Most entertainers would panic or have security remove the problem. But when hatred hit Sammy Davis Jr. during his 1965 Vegas performance, what followed created one of the most powerful moments in live entertainment history. This is the true story of how grace under fire silenced hate forever. October 15, 1965. The Copa Room at the Sands Hotel was packed beyond capacity for what had been advertised as just another Sammy Davis Jr. performance. But 1965 wasn't just another year, it was the height of the civil rights movement, and Las Vegas remained one of the most racially divided cities in America. The audience that night represented a cross-section of America that rarely shared the same space. Wealthy tourists from the South, liberal entertainers from Los Angeles, high-rolling businessmen from the East Coast, and local Vegas power brokers who still maintained strict racial hierarchies outside the casino walls. The atmosphere was tense before Sammy even took the stage, recalled Copa Room maitre d' Carl Cohen. You could feel the undercurrents. Some people were there to see great entertainment. Others were there to make a point about who belonged where. At 40, Sammy was at the peak of his performing powers. But he was also carrying the weight of representing his race during one of the most volatile periods in American history. Every performance was more than entertainment. It was a statement about dignity, excellence, and the right to exist in spaces where he wasn't always welcome. The show began normally. Sammy opened with "The Lady is a Tramp," his signature song that always got the crowd moving. The Copa Room was electric. Celebrities in the front rows, high rollers at the premium tables, and packed standing room creating an atmosphere of sophisticated excitement. For the first 30 minutes, everything was perfect. Sammy's voice was in prime condition, his dance moves were flawless, and the audience was completely engaged. He moved seamlessly between singing, impressions, and the kind of spontaneous audience interaction that made his live performances legendary. He had them eating out of his hand, remembered musician Buddy Rich, who was in the audience that night. Rich, poor, black, white. Everybody was caught up in the magic. That's what made what happened next so shocking. Sammy had just finished Mr. Bojangles and was transitioning into his comedy routine when it happened. From somewhere in the middle of the packed room, a voice cut through the applause like a knife. "Hey boy, dance for us like a good little monkey." The words hit the Copa Room like a physical blow. 3,000 people fell completely silent. The racial slur was unmistakable, delivered with the kind of drunken aggression that meant whoever said it wanted confrontation, not just attention. Sammy stopped mid-sentence. The band behind him continued playing for a few more bars before trailing off into uncomfortable silence. The room held its breath, waiting to see how one of entertainment's biggest stars would handle being publicly humiliated in the most racist way possible. Security spotted the heckler quickly, a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit, clearly drunk, standing at a table in the middle section with several companions who looked mortified by his behavior. But protocol dictated waiting for Sammy's signal before removing paying customers, especially high rollers. You could have heard a pin drop, recalled audience member Patricia Williams, who was celebrating her anniversary at a front table. Nobody knew what to do. This wasn't just some random drunk. This was a direct racist attack in front of 3,000 witnesses. For what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds, Sammy stood perfectly still at center stage. His expression was unreadable behind his trademark sunglasses, but everyone in the room understood that they were witnessing a moment that would either destroy his career or define it forever. Then Sammy did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not the forced smile of someone trying to diffuse tension, but the genuine smile of someone who had just been presented with an opportunity to demonstrate something important about dignity, class, and how authentic strength responds to ignorant hatred. "Well, well, well," Sammy said into the microphone, his voice carrying perfectly to every corner of the now silent Copa Room. "Looks like we have a gentleman here who's confused about what year it is." The comment drew a few nervous chuckles from the audience, but the tension remained thick. Everyone waited to see where Sammy would take this. "Sir, Sammy continued, addressing the heckler directly while maintaining his position center stage. "I want to thank you for providing tonight's audience with a perfect demonstration of the difference between class and trash." The words were delivered with such controlled precision that they carried more impact than any shouted response could have achieved. The heckler, emboldened by alcohol and probably expecting either cowering or angry retaliation, tried to escalate. "Why don't you shut up and sing, boy? That's all you people are good for." The second racial attack created an even deeper silence. Several audience members actually gasped audibly. Others looked around nervously, wondering if they were about to witness violence or if security would finally intervene. But Sammy remained perfectly calm, and what he did next would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. "You know what, friend?" Sammy said, his voice now carrying the kind of quiet authority that commanded absolute attention. "I think you and I have different definitions of what makes someone valuable. You seem to think being born white makes you superior. I think being born human makes us equal, but what we do with our humanity is what makes us superior or inferior." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "So let me show you what I do with my humanity." What followed was not just a performance, it was a demonstration of excellence so complete, so overwhelming, and so undeniably superior that it transformed hatred into respect and turned a racist attack into an object lesson about the difference between inherited privilege and earned greatness. Sammy launched into a medley that showcased every talent he possessed. He sang with a voice so pure it made professional singers in the audience weep. He danced with precision that made trained dancers gasp in admiration. He played drums, trumpet, and piano with the skill of a virtuoso musician. He did impressions so accurate they seemed like channeling rather than imitation. But more than the technical brilliance was the emotional power. Sammy poured everything he had into those 15 minutes. Decades of facing prejudice, years of proving himself worthy of spaces where he wasn't wanted, and a lifetime of refusing to let other people's limitations define his possibilities. It was like watching someone prove that excellence transcends everything, remembered entertainer Lola Falana, who witnessed the performance. He wasn't just singing and dancing, he was demonstrating that talent, dignity, and class could overcome any ignorance. The audience was transfixed. People who had come expecting standard Vegas entertainment were witnessing something approaching the sacred, a master performer using his gifts not just to entertain, but to educate about the difference between hatred and humanity. And throughout it all, Sammy never looked directly at the heckler. He performed for everyone else in the room, treating the racist customer like the irrelevant background noise he was. When the medley ended, the Copa Room erupted in the longest standing ovation in the venue's history. 3,000 people, including many who had never applauded a black performer before, rose to their feet in thunderous appreciation that lasted over 5 minutes. But Sammy wasn't finished. "Now," he said when the applause finally died down, "I want to address our confused friend's second comment." The room fell silent again, wondering if the confrontation would escalate. "He said singing and dancing is all my people are good for," Sammy continued with a slight smile. "Well, sir, if you think what you just witnessed represents the limitations of my people, then I feel genuinely sorry for whatever limitations your people have accepted for themselves." The comment drew appreciative laughter from most of the audience, but Sammy raised his hand for silence. "But here's what I really want you to understand," he said, his voice now carrying the kind of serious authority that made comedy clubs feel like churches. "The reason I can do what I just did isn't because I'm black or white or any color. It's because I refuse to let other people's opinions about what I should be capable of limit what I was willing to work to become." He gestured toward the heckler's table. "You can sit there and hate me for my skin color, but you can't sit there and deny my capabilities. You can refuse to respect me as a human being, but you can't refuse to respect excellence when it's demonstrated right in front of your face." The educational aspect of the moment was now clear to everyone present. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a real-time lesson about the difference between prejudice and reality. "So I want to make you a deal," Sammy continued. "You can keep your hatred, That's your choice, and frankly, it's your burden to carry, not mine. But in exchange, I want you to remember what you witnessed here tonight." He paused for effect, making sure he had the complete attention of everyone in the room. "Because the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their race instead of their character, or their appearance instead of their capabilities, I want you to remember that you once sat in a room with someone you thought was inferior, and that person demonstrated abilities that exceeded anything you'll ever achieve in your lifetime." The words carried such quiet authority that even the heckler appeared to be listening intently. "Now," Sammy concluded, "security will escort you out so that the rest of these good people can enjoy their evening without further interruption from ignorance." As if they had been waiting for exactly that cue, 2 security guards appeared at the heckler's table. The man, now clearly sobered by the public education he had just received, made no attempt to resist. His companions looked mortified as they gathered their belongings and followed him toward the exit. But as the group reached the door, something unprecedented happened. The heckler stopped, turned back toward the stage, and for just a moment made eye contact with Sammy. The 2 men looked at each other across the packed Copa Room, one representing ignorance that had just been educated, the other representing dignity that had just proven itself unshakable. Then, in a gesture witnessed by 3,000 people, the heckler nodded slowly, not in friendship or approval, but in acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that he had encountered something that challenged everything he thought he knew about racial superiority and human worth. Sammy nodded back, not in forgiveness or acceptance of the man's beliefs, but in recognition that education had occurred and growth was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. The heckler left without another word, and the Copa Room erupted in another standing ovation, this time not just for the performance, but for the way Sammy had handled hatred with grace and transformed a potentially destructive moment into something approaching transcendent. "I've never seen anything like it," recalled Copa Room regular Jake Lansky. "Sammy took the worst thing that could happen to a performer, public racial humiliation, and turned it into the greatest demonstration of class and capability I've ever witnessed." The rest of the show was electric. The audience, having witnessed something extraordinary, gave Sammy their complete attention and appreciation. Every song was received like a gift, every joke like wisdom, every dance move like art. But more importantly, something had changed in the room. People who had never questioned their racial assumptions were quietly reconsidering what they thought they knew about Black capabilities. Audience members who had supported civil rights intellectually had just witnessed why that support was morally necessary. "That night changed how I thought about a lot of things," remembered audience member Robert Chen, a businessman from Los Angeles. "I'd always considered myself non-racist, but I realized I'd never really thought deeply about what it meant to judge people by their character instead of their appearance." Sammy didn't just entertain us, he educated us. Word of the incident spread through Las Vegas within hours. By the next morning, entertainment industry professionals throughout the country were talking about Sammy's handling of the racist heckler. The story grew in significance, as civil rights leaders recognized it as a perfect example of how dignity and excellence could combat prejudice more effectively than anger or retaliation. What Sammy did that night represented everything the civil rights movement was trying to achieve, observed Dr. Ralph Bunch, who heard about the incident through mutual friends. He proved that the best response to hatred wasn't hatred in return, but such overwhelming demonstration of excellence that prejudice became obviously absurd. The incident also had practical consequences for Las Vegas entertainment venues. Several major hotels quietly revised their policies about handling racial incidents, recognizing that protecting performers from harassment wasn't just morally right, it was good business that attracted audiences who wanted to witness excellence rather than ugliness. Years later, many audience members from that October night would cite Sammy's handling of the heckler as a transformative moment in their own understanding of race relations and human dignity. "I went to that show as entertainment," recalled Patricia Williams decades later. "I left understanding something fundamental about what real class looks like when it's tested by real ignorance. Sammy taught me that the most powerful response to hatred isn't anger. It's excellence that makes hatred look foolish by comparison. The story of the Copa Room incident became legendary within the entertainment industry as an example of how authentic character responds to its ugliest challenges. It proved that dignity, talent, and grace under pressure could transform even the most hostile situations into opportunities for education and growth. For Sammy himself, the incident represented validation of the approach he had developed over 20 years of facing similar challenges in less public circumstances. Instead of allowing prejudice to diminish him, he had learned to use it as motivation for demonstrating capabilities that exceeded anything his critics thought possible. The racist Heckler never returned to the Copa Room, but several audience members reported seeing him at other Sammy Davis Jr. performances over the following years, not as a fan, necessarily, but as someone who had learned that his assumptions about racial superiority were factually incorrect and personally limiting. The October 15, 1965 Copa Room performance became a watershed moment that proved entertainment could be more than escapism. It could be education, inspiration, and transformation wrapped in artistry so compelling that it changed minds along with moods. 3,000 people had entered the Sands Hotel that night, expecting to see a show. They witnessed something far more valuable, a demonstration of how authentic excellence responds to ignorant hatred and how grace under pressure can transform a moment of ugliness into a lesson about the best possibilities of human character.